What's poppin', YouTube? We're back. Today we're talking about my top 5 baits for spring bass fishing and how to fish them. We're gonna try to keep this video short and sweet. Nobody wants to watch a 15-minute video. You know, the main purpose of this is to give you guys the baits, and I'll just tell you a little bit how I fish them and where I fish them. Number one, and I think a lot of people will agree with me on this, is some sort of a jerk bait. You can see this one's it's a 1-3 fishing. It's called shadow spin. It's a little bit more complex than most that you'd see. It has the paddle tail on it, and it also has a spinner on the front here. But any sort of jerk bait, I'm going to be throwing this when the water's like 50 to 65 degrees, and your fish are starting to get into that pre-spawn, even up into the shallows a little bit, anywhere from 3 to 7 feet. With just nice jerks, twitches, anything to make this bait get some flash in the water as it's going through. That's going to be your big thing, is get some attention. And I'm going to be picking a color that contrasts your water color a little bit. If you have a lighter water, I'm going lighter color. Darker, muddier water, you know, maybe stick to your green, chartreuse. The number one bait, I think a lot of people would agree with me on this, is just a jerk bait. Any kind of jerk bait. Number two, I'm going with a crankbait, square bill crankbait. This one it's quite unbeatable. And these fish are still in that 6, 7, 8, 9 foot range. Throwing this same thing, 50 to 60 degrees for water temp. I'm working this low and just slowly cranking it in. And I'm usually gonna go with a red craw. This would be my go-to color for any lake. And I don't know what it is about it, but springtime when you get that red, it doesn't compare to any other color. You just crush them one after another if you get into a good area. Number 3 on the list, I got a paddle tail swim bait. I'm usually gonna throw white, whatever color you got, throw it. I really like this one with the VMC. It's got the little spoon underneath it, and it's also got your I think that it's called like a spring hold or something like that. It's a little spring screw on the end of your plastic, and it holds it there. But this one is it's really tough to beat because it's weedless. You can run this thing anywhere. You can run it up in your shallows 1 foot all the way to your deep, run it slow on the bottom. And this one you can really work on the bottom too if you want. The other ones you get snagged in the weeds, but this will go through it. I'm throwing this when the water's 55 to 65 degrees and those fish are really feeding, getting real aggressive, and they're starting to come up higher and higher, you know, working into that 1, 2 foot, 3 foot range even. And these fish are gonna crush them, especially smallmouth. This would be my go-to. Number 4. This one isn't as common as the other ones that I've had. It's a lipless crankbait, as you can see. This one's a little smaller one, a little chartreuse, white, bluish, yellow. This is all early spring that I'm talking about, before your fish are spawning. It's the exact same type thing, you know, your 60-degree water, whatever. Throw this, work it through there, and this, I'm twitching. A lot of people, I think, could just retrieve these with just a nice SETI reel. But I'm gonna be twitching this and jerking it and giving it some nice action. The same thing as the other ones, you know, just try to get a little bit of attention out of these fish and get them to feed. You know they're gonna be feeding because they're headed up for pre-spawn, so they're getting all their food before they go up in the shallows. And then they don't really eat too much when they're spawning, or really at all for the most part, until they're done. But my 5th one, it's just a swim bait or some sort of a glide bait, something like that, especially if you're talking about smallmouth. Smallmouth, these are excellent in the spring, and it's fun when you can find them. You work this the same as you'd work your jerk bait. You jerk this and then you get it to lay sideways, curl around. Any little action like that, these fish just love it in the spring. You know, these are all kind of the same. They're all kind of attention getters right now. You're trying to get these fish attention, like I mentioned a couple other times. And a lot of times they'll feed if you can get on the fish. The harder part is locating them. I'm just gonna talk a minute here about location. For my location, you know, if you're starting on a new lake, there's 3 things that fish need. They need this one spot to winter, they need a spot they can feed, and a spot they can spawn. Fish don't actually travel too far for any of that stuff. So if you can find a place where there's shallows and rocks with a nice point that gets down to 20 feet or so right off the end of the point, Because the fish, they can winter in the 20 foot, and then in the springtime they can come up and feed in that corner of the rocks, and then if you get up shallower even, then that's where they're spawning. So I'd really work your points just to start if you're looking at a lake. And you know, this fishing opener coming up in Minnesota this week, I'm gonna be throwing, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet of water around points, maybe a little deeper, 6 even. But we have a nice warm front coming through of 60-degree weather this whole week, and that's really gonna help out the fishing. But yeah, hopefully these tips help you, and if they do, then leave a like and subscribe to my channel. But with these tips, go crank them.